we've got about 10 minutes for questions and answers now. Can we get the lights up in the auditorium, please? We've got about 10 minutes for questions and answers. We have 4 roving microphones, people behind them, a couple down here at the bottom and a couple at the top. So if you'd like to ask a question, can you please put your hand up? And let's get this question stacked up. Let's get microphones in people's hands. Please state who you are and your company. And I'm going to start with a question for Bill, because he's closest to me. No, actually, as Bill has talked about his lifetime work, it's going to put him on the spot, but it's a pretty straightforward question. I'd really like to know, what is your favourite tall building that you have designed within KPF? And what is your favourite tall building that KPF haven't designed? And I know that's difficult, but can you approach that?
The answer most architects usually give to that question is the next one. And I believe I did finish with the next one in my presentation. Can't think of it so much in terms of a favorite, but in terms of what a building can accomplish. And I do definitely believe that the path of the tall building obviously has a long way to go. But one of the most profound opportunities with the tall building, and that's why it's so exciting to see a project like we have just seen in Singapore, is the ability to create within a very dense framework to create an extraordinarily human environment. And if the tall building has the capacity to be able to establish internal spatial relationships, I think that's sort of the next step in its evolution. So based on that perspective, I would have to stand with my initial suggestion that the last building that I'm working on is my favorite. As to a building which is a favorite that is not one of ours, I would have to, and this is so difficult, particularly being in this particular city, the work that's been done in this institution here on the tall building and the manifestation of that work in Chicago, of course, has had a tremendous influence on the tall building. But I have to say that my leaning towards the tall building and its value to our society or our culture lies in its ability to create sort of a human dialogue with the context. And as such, I think that the examples that were shown to us early in the development of the tall building have still a great deal to offer. And I would have to be a little bit evasive of your question, and I would put the Woolworth building as my favorite tall building.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Right, do we have some questions from the audience?
Are there any...
question in the middle there, yeah. Can you state your name and affiliation for...
My name is Jim Boss. I'm James W. Boss Company. We talked about super density. Now, I know a tall building is super tall after it's 300 meters tall. Is there a better definition of what's super dense in an urban habitat? Is there a certain marker or a definition?
Who would you like to address that question to? To the Pinnacle team?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to explain that. I think when we titled the project, the talk Super Density, I was really thinking about what happens if we multiplied this particular project to house 6.5 billion people, since we were already thinking about 1,000 Singapores in our exhibition in Venice Biennale this year. And in order to house the entire Singapore in a project like Duxton, we would actually only need, it's 7,000, so it's another 1,000 of this project, and our project is about 150 meters long by about 20 meters. So if we have 100 of these, we would only need one little tiny string right across the island to house every single person on the island. And that would allow us then to use all the land around us for greenery and whatsoever. And I think that is the sort of provocation that we were trying to make about tall buildings. If we were to compress and live in a higher density, I think in America we are very good at making towers for production offices, but I think in Singapore we had no choice but to think about towers as living environments, one stacked on top of the other. And I think today we are also looking at parks and perhaps other services that's going in. And super density is really about living in tall, dense environment and how to make that a very livable proposition. So it's not a scientific definition, but it is a provocation in a way to think about living closer together so that we can free up more land, we can have smaller networks of roads and be able to transit very efficiently. So going back to America in Florida, so if every single American was to shift to Florida and build this super density towns, crazy utopian idea, but you can imagine you do not really have to fly so much, you do not really have to drive so much, you could just take a train anywhere to meet anyone. You do not have to run so many pipes, sewerage pipes, whatever pipes that you run underground, street lighting, everything would just be more compressed. And in Singapore, the public utilities, every single public utility makes money because the network is just so small. The water makes money, waterworks makes money, power grid makes money, train makes money, bus makes money. Every single one of, because the network is just small, supported by a high purchasing power. So again, this is what super density was actually referring to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peng Beng. Another question?
This is a general question. Dave Opatic, AGM Chicago. I just would like to know if there are any schools, IIT, a new Bauhaus, whatever, who are really actively working and pulling a lot of the questions that we're running into today and future questions in a real sustainable field of study and maybe writing their own little encyclopedias and how to, all the things we're talking about. Is this being concentrated anywhere, or is it just everyone doing their own thing?
Well, I certainly know there's a lot of it going on here at IIT. I think IIT is one of the few universities around the world where we have set educational programs specifically on tall buildings every year. Occasionally you'll get schools of architecture where there will be a tall building studio, but I mean consistently 4, 5, 6 professors running tall building design studios, many with sustainability as a strong theme.
Are they documenting the questions that then could be spread out to the other schools?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, some are. In actual fact, on the council website, we have a section called Design Research, which documents a lot of this work from around the world, not only IIT, but in England and Netherlands and various other places. I don't know if any of our panelists have any insight on what might be happening in their city, but I can tell you it's happening here. Okay, so that's a partial answer to your question. Another question. Do we have a question for the Bank of America building team?
Excuse me. I'm Sarah Tamor. I'm with the KPF contingent, proud to be with Alex Ward, who worked on the Wacker Drive building with Bill. So, and I have a question for the Pinnacle team. I'm sorry, it's the wrong team, but my question is about the age in place concept that you talked about. And I wonder if you are thinking about integrating infrastructure for aging populations into the housing that you're doing and how we might perhaps do a better job of that in the United States.
Okay. For aging in place, what we have done is we've gone back, one, to our existing properties to renew them, to provide them with, one, for example, barrier-free accessibility from public spaces to their homes. This would include providing lifts for them that stop at every floor. And then, of course, other things include, for newer developments, we have included even elderly equipments within the flats itself, the toilets. We've made sure that the flats are designed barrier-free for the elderly. We've also done mixing of typology of flats within the block itself, so that you have people to age in place, to live with their families, to live together with the families, or to live separately from their families, but within the same block itself. We're looking in terms of infrastructure for the elderly within the communal community blocks of each precinct itself, so that they can have elderly care at the precinct itself. We have a lot of NGOs, non-government organizations that provide support for the elderly. So we're trying to create spaces for them so that they can run their companies profitably, even though they're NGOs, so that they can have this strong network of sharing between the communities itself. That is for aging in place. So we have done a number of research in aging in place, but I think there's more to it, and there are groups of people that are looking into how to do that more sustainably. I think the issue moving forth is to do it sustainably. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Another question. Can we have a question for the Bank of America team, please?
Here.
Lady waving
Yes.
at the top.
My name is Carol Wyant. I'm Executive Director of the Form-Based Codes Institute, and this is a question to the Bank of America team. As you look toward becoming more sustainable with all of your properties, are you taking into consideration location, where the building is placed in relationship to mass transit, to density, et cetera?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think that one of the things that I didn't get a chance to talk about is our alternative work program called My Work. Excuse me. And what we've done is, and I know this also might be a bit blasphemous here, but the most efficient building is one that's not built. And so when we look to try to make our portfolio more efficient, we're looking to see, can we create more dense office spaces. And so we're looking to have people give up their dedicated workspace. Excuse me. So when people give up their dedicated workspace, we're able to actually create much more dense environments. So instead of one-to-one with a cubicle, we're able to have drop-in spaces. So we can go 5-to-1 or 8-to-1 in these drop-in spaces. And we actually have 20,000 associates right now who are enrolled in the program. And what we've done is we've looked to see where people live, where mass transit exists, and how long their commutes are to decide where to put some of these My Work centers. And so as a result, we've been able to create work that comes to the people instead of them always having to, because you've seen people who commute an hour and a half, 2 hours each way to work. So that's something that we definitely consider when we look to create new locations.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. We'll take one more question. Actually, down here at the bottom, please.
Hi, hello. My name is Alfonso Barrolet from Titanium, Chile. I have a question for Richard Khoo. Richard, first, congratulations for your project. We think this is such a brilliant and smart building. My question is, how can sustainable architecture reach a balance between the height, density, and cost in order to be economically feasible?
Well, thank you. A few things have happened. One is under the term marketplace transformation. So in New York City, for example, it took Battery Park City Authority, a government agency, to drive forward first. So we would not have been able to pour a skyscraper with something called 45% blast furnace slag concrete if it hadn't been for the Battery Park City Authority mandating it originally in their guidelines. You can imagine the concrete industry in New York and how stuck in their ways they are. So it took the first few projects to go ahead. As the Bank of America Tower was being poured, we did another project, a market rate housing project, that we went to 50% blast furnace slag at no additional cost. So just in a series of a few short years, the concrete marketplace in New York City had been completely transformed to go from slightly additional expense for attacking carbon footprint to no expense whatsoever. So it takes the first few projects to transform the marketplace. The same thing with demolition debris, a very similar industry in New York City. Carting is the word that we use for it. Originally, when we were talking about taking buildings down and separating all the waste, it was much more expensive to take these buildings apart, separate out the waste into separate containers and take them away. But as we deal globally and specific in the urban centers with a crisis of what do we do with all these waste streams, the tipping fees, what they call a tipping fee to dump a container of waste in the United States, continued to go up. And what happened was, once they separate the waste on the construction site, they now have a container of copper or brick or wood, and now that container actually has a value as a resource, and they get a check written to them. So that's completely transformed the waste stream cycle in New York City demolition and now in the construction industry. You imagine when you get a stereo delivered with all the waste products associated with the box, the little peanuts that go with it and the wrapping material. Imagine building one of these skyscrapers and the intensity of construction debris that comes up, all the pallets and the spools. So partly through the standards of the U.S. Green Building Council, the tracking of all these materials and what happens with them came up. So originally, even that standard wasn't tight enough. So with the spools that the big wires come on, the big wood spools or the pallets, if they got broken down and thrown in a container with just wood in it, it would count towards your lead system, and everybody was down with that. But then they realized that this is ridiculous because a spool can be reused as a spool and a pallet can be reused as a pallet. The problem was we didn't have enough space on the construction sites. So we did a little work, and the Durst organization and the Bank of America supported the idea of making space on the site so that we could get the spool guys and the pallet guys to come back and take theirs away. So it was recycled not just as wood, but as a reusable, finished product again. So my point there is it takes a few projects to get out ahead, but I think we're seeing the marketplace transform completely. The amount of tools that we have available to us to make more sustainable choices has expanded incredibly just in the last 5 years. So it's driving ahead. It's consumer demand. What we need to get to next is the other end of all of these things. It's this stuff. It's the laptops, the PDAs, the BlackBerries. The other end of these are the biggest energy hogs on Earth, the data centers. And we need to drive upstream in industrial design right now to rethink the way that those work and the way that we work with all these monitors and all these laptops we use. That's going to be a big place to make a difference. And we're already seeing great inroads now into affordable housing and supportive housing, that it's become a standard when there's a social good, a social equity issue. And with younger generations, this is really important. The young architects who come to our office, that's the first thing they want to work on. If I were to say we have another project like the Bank of America Tower, and I asked for volunteers in my office, I'd get like 3 or 4 volunteers that say, yeah, I'll work on that with you. If I say we have a really, really low budget, horrible site in a very difficult neighborhood to do supportive housing, affordable housing, will anybody work on the weekends and late at night, on this project with me? I'll get 20 responses. Please let me work on the project. So there's a complete change in the mentality of what architects want to work. I find the younger architects coming in, they're pushing towards social equity issues along with the environmental movement. So I think we're well on our way, and we just need to keep on pushing that once you get something in motion, it starts to gain momentum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Right, we're going to break now for coffee. We're going to have about 20 minutes for coffee and then be back in here for the session afterwards. We have a little gift for each of the speakers, which is actually a copy of our 2010 awards book. So their projects grace the pages. And by the way, it's for sale at our exhibition stand. So please, could you give a round of applause, final round of applause to the speakers?
Yeah.